So I'm currently designing a visual identity for a premium skincare brand, and I wanted to show you how I create a typography system that will make this brand look premium. Now this is a spec project for Surmise, and they want this identity to make them look like they're more premium and higher up on the market. And this project has a very unique creative direction. So this is the phrase that guides everything in this visual identity. It's blocky, yet flowy. Now, this is pretty interesting because these are two conflicting terms. So I have to find fonts that contribute to this idea of it has to be somewhat blocky, but also feel flowy at the same time. It's kind of interesting. Now I want to show you the process that I go through to picking fonts for projects like these or for brands. And this is kind of how I start. Now over here we have 32 different fonts that I am looking at and comparing, which honestly, all things considered, this isn't very many. I actually found what I liked pretty quick. Let me explain this. So what I do is I write the name of the brand, and then I write this word hand gloves. Now, if you're wondering why hand gloves, that's kind of weird. Each letter in the word hand gloves has a bunch of unique shapes. And so by looking at these shapes, I can get an idea of what the entire alphabet looks like when using this font. It's a small designer trick that helps with picking these fonts. What I do is I literally just go through these and I try and determine, do any of these contribute to the idea of blocky yet flowy. This is a process that sometimes is supernatural and I can find something very quickly. Sometimes it takes a long time, but in the end I did find a set of typefaces that I really liked, and these were the ones that I picked. So we have Nico for our serif font, and then we're using Lexend for our sans serif font. Now some designers swear by only using 4 fonts for your entire career. Like for every project ever, you need 4 fonts. Others go fully bespoke and they create custom typefaces for every single project. I kind of land somewhere in the middle, and these are pretty good fonts for it. Alright, so now let's talk about the actual typography system. So a couple of things that we need to figure out is 1, we need to figure out scaling, and 2, we need to figure out, I would say, purpose, which basically what that means is what font do I use for which purpose. So let's start first with scaling. Now some designers will swear by using fixed point sizes. You must use 12 and then 16 and then 24 and then 48, or as an example. You have to stick to these point sizes. I'm not a huge fan of that. What I personally would rather do is use a ratio. So for example, we have a point size of 12. Let's say we want to use a ratio of 1.618. 1.618 is the golden ratio. That's why I picked that number. We multiply its point size by 1.618, and we get our next point size, which is 19. Round that down to the nearest point size. So we take 12, we multiply it by this, and we get this one. And then we do the same thing. We take 19, multiply that by 1.618, and then we get 30. So that's the next point size, and so on and so on. So if we go back to the research and strategy phase of this project, we made a list of brand nouns, and on that list of brand nouns is Earth/planet, because this brand is very nature focused. I thought, where can I pull a ratio that would actually have some type of a meaning for this brand? I don't want to pull some arbitrary ratio out of thin air. I want whatever ratio I use to actually mean something for the brand. This is the Earth, and then let's say that this is, this is this is the Earth, right? I'm drawing it. It's very pretty. Earth is 2/3 water, and so I wanted to use this ratio in the identity, and the way that I'm using it is it's a ratio of 1 to 2.3. So what that looks like is we take our 12-point font, we multiply it by 2.3, round it to the nearest point size, which is 28, and we get that. And then we take 28, we multiply it by 2.3, and we get 64. Now this is a pretty extreme ratio. We're we're more than doubling the point size every single time. It's quite dramatic. Now the starting point for the scaling system kind of depends on the medium. If this is some type of print, maybe we'll start at 12. If this is digital, we might start at 16. Doesn't really matter, but the fact that we're using a ratio of 2.3 means that regardless, I know whatever my starting point is, it's going to be uniform and consistent, which is very important. So now that we have the scaling down by using this ratio of 2.3, now we need to determine the purpose of each of these fonts. And what I like to do is have the more readable fonts be used for body and subheadlines, and then the more unique, not quite as readable fonts be used for like important information or more distinguished pieces of text. So what that means is that we use Nico as our headline or our key information, and then Lexend becomes our subheadline and our body. And it's as easy as that. And you can see here we have our scaling system applied. So we have Nico being used for our headline. We go down 2.3 times to our subheadline, which is now a different font, Lexend, and that is in 28 points. And then our body is also Lexend at 12 points. What I like about this ratio system is that it adapts cleanly to any medium or format size, from the small print on a packaging box to large type on a billboard. So now I want to talk about layout and how this typography system might be used in the real world. Now this kind of teeters on the edge of visual language, which I'm just going to touch on here. I'm going to do a deep dive in the next video, which is super cool. Visual language is really what makes you distinct and stand out compared to anyone else on the market. But here's what we got. With a ratio determined, we can do some pretty unique stuff. So for example, we could have our logo be here. And if I want this to be the biggest feature on the page, then I will scale down by 2.3 times and go to the next size. So let's say I'm going to draw some boxes, and let's say that these boxes represent focal points or blocks of text or an image or just, something that will draw the eye. And we had something like this. So our logo and then something here, here, and there. So this layout is pretty irregular, and we have 4 different focal points on this page. Now my thinking here is this is the largest feature, and then we'll go down by 2.3 times, which of course this is only an estimate. But we have this box here, and then these other boxes can be the same size, and it will guide your eye down just because of the flow of the elements. Elements are, the different items on the page. So since we only have 4 elements, what that means is we need simple copy and strong images. So here's an example of what I just drew mocked up here in my design program. So we have these 1, 2, 3, 4 elements. And here's what I think is unique about this. So first of all, I do think it would be a good idea to have like a stroke on here to make this a box. Let's turn that up like that, center it like that. So everything goes into a box like this because we want this to be blocky, right? But what we have here, and this is kind of the unique idea behind this type of a poster, is we have these blocky elements, but if we look at the flow that your eyeball takes, you go here and then down and then here, what it looks like is the S from our logo. So we have blocky elements that are flowing down the page. Same thing over here. I scaled this logo up because we want that 2.3 times ratio to be used even across something like this. And it's a similar thing. We have this S connecting each of the elements, even though they're kind of blocky or they're just text pieces. So I don't know, this is an exploration. I feel like it's pretty smart, but I don't know if this would work in the real world. This seemingly random dispersal of elements might just be seen as confusing, or it might be the opposite, where it's actually kind of unique and it would cause someone to linger on the page and actually try and take it in to try and understand it. It's a mixed box. Either way, I honestly wouldn't know without testing. And what something like this needs is repeated exposure in order to determine if it's actually viable. Here's another way that we can use that idea of blocky yet flowy. So all of these elements is, blocky here, a block of text here, a block of text there. Right, so all of the elements themselves are blocky, but if we look at the focal points, which are these here, we have the same thing. We have our S, except it's flipped. What we get is something like this. So even though the elements kind of look like they're, randomly distributed, there is actual thinking behind it, because we're using this flowy S shape to connect these blocky elements. And notice the scaling that we have here. I mentioned before that the scaling was quite dramatic, where we're going down by more than 2 times each time. But look what we have here. We have a huge element here taking up more than half the page, and then we shrink down to this logo here, and then from here to here we go even smaller, and then here to here we go even smaller. So that's how I'm integrating the ratio into the sizing of our elements on the poster. And because of that, I think it creates a deliberate hierarchy, which is like the level of importance. So it's like this picture is the most important, and then because this is the next biggest, this is the most important, and then we move from here and down to there. And the scaling really draws your eye around. So you start here, and then up here, and then down. That's my thinking behind it. Is it reasonable? I'm honestly not 100% certain. But I do hope it shows you that a solid typography system is a great start, but a typography system on its own is not enough to make your brand feel premium. When you combine it with strategic visual language, that is what makes brands able to charge 10 times more than other companies. So go watch this video where I create that visual language, and you can see it all come together.